What would you do if you woke up one morning and couldn't recognize your own reflection? When Sarah Mitchell looks in the mirror, someone else stares back, and that someone has been dead for over a century. The car accident should have been minor, just a fender bender that left her shaken but unharmed. But in those few seconds of unconsciousness, something fundamental shifted. Now 5 dead women live inside her mind, each one desperate to tell a story that was violently silenced. Each one demanding justice that was never served. And as Sarah loses hours to blackouts, as her husband watches her become a stranger, as her own identity fractures into pieces she can't control, one terrifying question consumes her. If she helps them get what they need, will there be anything left of Sarah Mitchell at all? This is a story about the voices we silence, the truths we bury, and the impossible weight of carrying the dead. It's about a woman who must choose between losing herself completely or becoming something she never imagined, a bridge between the living and those who refuse to stay forgotten. If you want to discover how Sarah navigates this impossible reality, follow the channel, leave a like and comment below telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. The mirror showed a stranger. Sarah pressed her trembling fingers against the cold glass, searching for something familiar in the reflection staring back. The face looked like hers. Same green eyes, same pointed chin, same small scar above the left eyebrow from when she fell off her bike at 7. But something underneath felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin that fit too perfectly. Her breath fogged the mirror. When it cleared, she could swear the reflection blinked a fraction of a second after she did. The bathroom tiles were ice beneath her bare feet. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes now, maybe longer. Time had become elastic lately, stretching and compressing in ways that made her stomach twist. She knew she should move, get ready for work, pretend everything was normal. But normal had become a foreign language she could no longer speak fluently. A sharp knock rattled the door. "Sarah, you okay in there?" Marcus, her husband of 3 years. The man who still kissed her forehead every morning, who left sticky notes with terrible jokes on the coffee maker, who held her hand during movies, even after all this time. The man who had no idea that his wife was fracturing into pieces too small to count. "Yeah, just give me a minute." Her voice sounded hollow, like an echo of an echo. She heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway, hesitant, worried. Guilt twisted through her chest, sharp and familiar. He deserved better than this version of her, this shell that went through the motions while something dark and nameless grew inside her mind like poisonous moss. Sarah forced herself to look away from the mirror, to focus on getting dressed. Black slacks, blue blouse, the silver necklace Marcus gave her for their anniversary. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed. But even as she buttoned her blouse, she felt it, that creeping sensation that she was watching herself from somewhere else, somewhere distant and cold. The kitchen smelled like burned toast when she finally emerged. Marcus stood at the counter, scraping blackened bread into the trash with focused determination. His jaw was tight, shoulders hunched. He only burned toast when he was anxious. "Sorry," he muttered, not looking up. "I'll make fresh." "It's fine. I'm not hungry anyway." The lie came easily now. Everything was fine. She was fine. The world was fine. Marcus turned to face her, and she saw the worry etched into the lines around his mouth. When had those lines gotten so deep? "You didn't sleep again last night. I heard you pacing." "Just restless." Another lie, smooth as silk. She hadn't told him about the dreams, if you could even call them dreams. More like memories that didn't belong to her, scenes playing out in her head while she lay rigid in the darkness, too afraid to close her eyes fully, afraid of what she might see, afraid of what she might become. "Sarah." He crossed the kitchen, reached for her hand. His touch was warm, real, everything she wasn't anymore. "Talk to me, please. You've been different for weeks now. Distant, like you're somewhere else. The accuracy of his words sent ice through her veins. She was somewhere else. Or maybe something else was here, taking up residence in the spaces between her thoughts. I'm just tired. She squeezed his hand, forced a smile that felt like cracking glass. Work's been crazy. He studied her face, and she could see him wanting to push, wanting to dig deeper. But they'd been married long enough for him to recognize the walls when they went up. His shoulders sagged slightly, defeat written in the curve of his spine. Okay, he said quietly, but I'm here. Whenever you're ready to tell me what's really going on. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Sarah wanted to tell him, wanted to explain that she couldn't sleep because every time she closed her eyes, she saw a woman she'd never met dying in ways she couldn't possibly know. Wanted to describe the sensation of her thoughts splitting, fracturing, becoming something multiple and strange. Wanted to confess that sometimes, more and more lately, she looked down at her hands and didn't recognize them as her own. But how do you tell someone you love that you're losing yourself? That the person they married might be dissolving like salt in water, leaving behind something else entirely? I love you, she said instead, because it was the only truth she was certain of anymore. Marcus kissed her forehead, soft and gentle, and she closed her eyes against the sting of tears. When she opened them again, she caught her reflection in the kitchen window. The woman staring back smiled. Sarah's mouth hadn't moved. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. A text from her assistant. Dr. Chen called. Wants to move your 2 p.m. appointment to 10 a.m. Says it's urgent. Dr. Chen, her therapist of 6 months. The one person besides Marcus who knew something was wrong, though even she didn't know the full extent. Sarah had been careful, rationing out her symptoms like a gambler counting cards, never revealing too much at once. But urgent wasn't a word Dr. Chen used lightly. Sarah's fingers were numb as she typed back confirmation. Across the kitchen, Marcus was making coffee, humming something tuneless under his breath, completely unaware that his wife was standing at the edge of an abyss she couldn't name. The reflection in the window smiled wider. Sarah looked away, grabbed her purse, kissed Marcus goodbye with lips that felt like someone else's. As she walked to her car, the morning sun bright and cheerful and utterly wrong, one thought circled through her mind like a vulture. If she wasn't Sarah anymore, then who or what was she becoming? Dr. Chen's office always smelled like lavender and lies. Sarah sat in the familiar leather chair, her spine rigid, hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. The clock on the wall ticked with aggressive precision, each second landing like a small hammer against her skull. 10:15. She'd been sitting here for 15 minutes while Dr. Chen reviewed her file, lips pressed into a thin line that kept getting thinner. The silence stretched like taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. Sarah focused on the diplomas hanging on the wall. Harvard, Johns Hopkins, certificates in trauma therapy and cognitive behavioral treatment. All very impressive, all very useless if the doctor couldn't understand what was happening inside Sarah's fragmenting mind. Tell me about the dreams again. Dr. Chen finally looked up, her dark eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She'd abandoned her usual warm expression, replaced by something clinical and cold that made Sarah's intestines coil. I told you last week, they're just nightmares. Sarah heard the defensive edge in her own voice, hated it. She sounded like a child caught lying about homework. Sarah, Dr. Chen set down the file with deliberate slowness. You've been my patient for 6 months. I've watched you deteriorate from mild anxiety to something far more concerning. The nightmares aren't just nightmares anymore, are they? The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing inward. Sarah's throat tightened, constricting around words she didn't want to speak. Outside the window she could see people walking by. Normal people with normal problems, people who didn't wake up at 3 in the morning convinced they were someone else. They feel real, she whispered finally, more real than being awake sometimes. Dr. Chen leaned forward, elbows on her desk. The movement was careful, measured, like approaching a wounded animal. Define real. Sarah's laugh came out bitter, jagged. I'm not sure I know what real means anymore. She unclenched her hands, watched blood flow back into her fingers, leaving them pink and strange. Last night, I dreamed I was a woman named Elizabeth. She lived in the 1800s. She wore a green dress with pearl buttons, 27 of them down the front. I counted. She had a husband who hit her when he drank, which was every night, and she... Sarah's voice cracked like thin ice. She killed herself, walked into a lake with stones in her pockets. I felt the water filling her lungs. I felt her die. The words hung in the air between them, ugly and true. Dr. Chen's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw her grip her pen tighter. Have you had dreams about Elizabeth before? She's new. There've been others. Sarah pressed her palms against her thighs, trying to anchor herself to something solid. A girl named Hannah who died in a fire in 1952. A woman called Maria who bled out after childbirth. A teenager, I never learned her name, who got hit by a car in the 70s. Her voice was flat now, mechanical, reciting facts like reading from a grocery list. They're all dead, Dr. Chen. Every single one of them is dead, and I know exactly how they died because I was there. I was them. The clock ticked louder. Or maybe that was Sarah's heart, hammering against her ribs like something trying to escape. Sarah, what you're describing sounds like extremely vivid, intrusive thoughts, possibly connected to dissociative episodes. Doctor, Chen's voice had shifted into careful professional mode, each word chosen with precision. Have you experienced any lost time? Moments where you can't account for where you were or what you were doing? The question landed like a punch. Sarah thought about yesterday afternoon, the 3 hours that simply vanished between leaving work and arriving home. She'd found herself parked outside a house she'd never seen before, in a neighborhood she didn't recognize, with no memory of driving there. Her phone showed 15 missed calls from Marcus. Sometimes, she admitted quietly. Dr. Chen nodded slowly, making notes. The scratch of pen on paper sounded like nails on a chalkboard. And the mirror incident you mentioned last week? Seeing your reflection move independently? It's getting worse. The confession burst out before Sarah could stop it. This morning I watched myself smile when I wasn't smiling. And sometimes... She stopped, swallowed hard against the taste of copper. Sometimes I catch movement in mirrors from the corner of my eye, like there's someone else there with me, multiple someones. How many? The question was so simple, so direct, that Sarah almost laughed. How many ghosts lived inside her head? How many dead women had taken up residence in the empty spaces of her mind? I don't know. They blur together. But they're all angry, Dr. Chen, furious. They died badly, violently, unfairly, and they're... Sarah's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They're trying to tell me something, or maybe they're trying to become me. I can't tell the difference anymore. Dr. Chen set down her pen with careful deliberation. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Sarah's stomach drop. I'm going to be direct with you because I think we're past the point of gentle approaches. What you're describing aligns with several possible diagnoses, some of which require immediate intervention. I want to refer you to a colleague who specializes in dissociative disorders and potentially to a psychiatrist for medication evaluation. You think I'm crazy. It wasn't a question. I think you're experiencing something very real and very frightening that's affecting your ability to function. That's not crazy, Sarah. That's a medical condition requiring treatment. Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. But I'm also concerned about your safety. Have you had thoughts of harming yourself? The image of Elizabeth walking into the lake flashed through Sarah's mind, the cold water, the deliberate surrender, the strange peace that came with letting go. They have. The women in my head. They've all harmed themselves, or been harmed. I feel their deaths like they're mine. That's not what I asked. Sarah met Dr. Chen's eyes directly for the first time since entering the office. I don't want to die. But I'm not sure how much longer I can fight to stay alive when there are so many dead women living inside me." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by that relentless ticking clock. Dr. Chen reached for her phone, and Sarah knew with crystalline certainty that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't control. "I'm calling Dr. Morrison. He's the best in the field, and he has an opening this afternoon. I want you to see him today, Sarah. Not next week, not tomorrow. Today." Sarah wanted to argue, to insist she was fine, to walk out of this office and pretend this conversation never happened. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of fear and denial, a small voice whispered the truth she'd been avoiding. She was losing. The women were winning. And if she didn't get help soon, Sarah Mitchell might disappear entirely, leaving only echoes of the dead in her place. Dr. Morrison's office sat at the end of a hallway that seemed to stretch forever, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like trapped insects. Sarah's footsteps echoed against linoleum floors that had been polished to an almost mirror-like shine, and she deliberately avoided looking down. The last thing she needed right now was another reflection that might move wrong. The waiting room was empty, except for a middle-aged woman behind a glass partition who barely glanced up when Sarah approached. The clock above the receptionist's head read 3:47. Sarah had lost nearly 4 hours between leaving Dr. Chen's office and arriving here. She'd found herself parked outside a cemetery, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that red crescents from her nails marked her palms. No memory of driving there, no explanation for why she'd been standing among graves, reading names of women who died decades ago. "Sarah Mitchell?" The receptionist's voice was flat, disinterested. "Fill these out." The clipboard was cold in Sarah's hands, the pen attached by a metal chain that rattled when she moved. Standard medical forms, insurance information, emergency contacts, medical history. Simple questions that should have been easy to answer, but felt impossibly complicated. Have you experienced hallucinations? Check yes. Have you had thoughts of self-harm? Her pen hovered. Elizabeth's voice whispered in her mind, describing the peaceful surrender of drowning. Hannah screamed about the flames. Maria wept about the blood that wouldn't stop flowing. Check yes. Do you hear voices that others cannot hear? Sarah almost laughed. Voices didn't begin to cover it. She heard entire lives, felt entire deaths, carried the weight of women who'd been silenced by violence and tragedy and sheer bad luck. Check yes, yes, yes. Her hand cramped as she wrote, letters becoming shakier with each line. Beside her, the empty chairs seemed to multiply, doubling and tripling in her peripheral vision. When she blinked, they returned to normal. When she blinked again, shadow figures sat in 3 of them, translucent women with hollow eyes and mouths frozen in silent screams. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, counted to 10, forced herself to breathe. When she looked again, the chairs were empty. Just chairs, just vinyl cushions and metal frames, and nothing supernatural, nothing impossible. "You okay, honey?" The receptionist was watching her now, concern creasing her forehead. "Fine." The lie tasted like ash. "Just tired." The door to the inner office opened, and a man stepped out, tall, maybe 60, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to see too much. Dr. Morrison. He looked nothing like Sarah had imagined. She'd pictured someone clinical and cold, but his smile was warm, genuine, the kind that made you want to trust him. "Sarah, I'm Dr. Morrison. Come on back." His office was different from Dr. Chen's. No diplomas on the walls, no leather furniture or mahogany desk. Instead, 2 comfortable chairs faced each other near a window overlooking a small garden. Books lined floor-to-ceiling shelves, their spines worn and cracked from frequent reading. A wooden box sat on a side table, its surface carved with symbols Sarah didn't recognize. "Please, sit, Dr. E." Morrison gestured to one of the chairs, settling into the other with the ease of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. "Dr. Chen spoke with me about your situation. I want you to know that everything we discuss stays between us, and nothing you say will shock or frighten me. I've worked with cases like yours for 30 years. Cases like yours. The words should have been comforting, but instead sent ice through Sarah's veins. How many people sat in this chair before her, fractured and broken, carrying the dead inside their minds? I don't understand what's happening to me. Her voice came out small, childlike. I'm not crazy. I know how that sounds, but I'm not. I don't think you're crazy. Dr. Morrison leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. Tell me about the women. The direct approach caught Sarah off guard. No warm-up questions, no gentle probing, just straight to the heart of it. There are, she swallowed hard, at least 5 that I can distinguish. Elizabeth, Hannah, Maria, and 2 others whose names I don't know yet. They're all dead. They all died violently or tragically, and they're all, her breath hitched, they're all trying to exist through me. Dr. Morrison nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful rather than alarmed. Do they speak to you? Sometimes. Mostly I just feel them, their emotions, their memories, their deaths. Elizabeth drowned herself. Hannah burned. Maria bled out after childbirth. The others, Sarah's hands trembled in her lap. One was murdered, strangled. I can feel her hands clawing at her own throat, trying to breathe. The other died in a car accident, and I relive the impact over and over. How long have you been aware of them? 6 months, maybe 7. It started small. Déjà vu, strange dreams, feeling like I'd been places I'd never visited. But it's gotten worse, exponentially worse. Now I lose time. I see them in mirrors. Sometimes, she stopped, afraid to continue. Sometimes what, Sarah? Sometimes I don't know which one is me. The confession broke something inside her chest. I look in the mirror and I can't tell if I'm Sarah or Elizabeth or Hannah or one of the others. My own face looks foreign. My hands don't feel like mine. And Marcus, my husband, he keeps asking what's wrong. But how do I explain that his wife might not exist anymore? That she might be dissolving into 5 dead women who refuse to stay dead? Dr. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those penetrating eyes. Then he reached for the wooden box, opened it carefully. Inside lay a collection of photographs, old ones, their edges yellowed with age. I'm going to show you something, Sarah. I want you to tell me if any of these women look familiar. He spread the photographs on the small table between them. Black and white images of women from different eras, different decades. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as her eyes landed on the 3rd photograph. It was Elizabeth. Green dress with 27 pearl buttons, dark hair pinned in a style from the 1800s, eyes sad and distant, but it was unmistakably her. That's, Sarah's voice broke. That's Elizabeth. Dr. Morrison nodded slowly, unsurprised. Elizabeth Hartwell died in 1847 in a lake about 40 miles from here. And this one? He pointed to another photograph. Hannah, younger than Sarah had imagined, maybe 16, with burns scarring half her visible face in the photo. Hannah, Sarah whispered, Hannah Prescott, died in a tenement fire in 1952. He indicated a 3rd photograph. Maria Torres died during childbirth in 1973. Sarah stared at the images, her entire reality tilting sideways. How do you have these? How do you know? Because you're not the first, Sarah. Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. And you won't be the last. What you're experiencing has a name, a history, and most importantly, he met her eyes directly, it has a cure. But first, you need to understand exactly what's happening to you and why these women have chosen you specifically. The room seemed to pulse around Sarah, walls breathing in and out. In the window's reflection, she saw herself sitting in the chair, but behind her stood 5 translucent figures, all watching Dr. Morrison with expressions ranging from hope to fury. They're here right now, aren't they? Dr. Morrison asked calmly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Good, he said and smiled. That means we can finally get started. What do you mean they chose me? Sarah's voice came out sharper than intended, edges serrated with fear and desperate confusion. The 5 translucent figures behind her chair remained motionless in the window's reflection, but she could feel their attention like static electricity across her skin. Dr. Morrison gathered the photographs carefully, returning them to the wooden box with reverence usually reserved for sacred objects. His movements were slow, deliberate, giving Sarah time to process what she'd just seen. Irrefutable proof that the women haunting her mind had been real, breathing people with documented deaths. The dead don't attach randomly, Sarah. They're drawn to specific living vessels, people with certain... He paused, searching for the right word. Certain frequencies, for lack of a better term. You're what we call a conduit. Someone whose consciousness operates on a wavelength that the departed can access and inhabit. The word inhabit made Sarah's stomach lurch. She thought of parasites burrowing into hosts, of invasive species choking out native plants. You're saying I'm possessed? No. Dr. Morrison's response was immediate, firm. Possession implies hostile takeover, something demonic or evil. This is different. These women aren't trying to harm you, Sarah. They're trying to exist through you because they have unfinished business that won't let them rest. Sarah pressed her palms against her thighs, grounding herself in the sensation of fabric beneath her fingers, the solid reality of her own body. Except it didn't feel entirely like her own body anymore. Her left hand tingled with phantom pain. Elizabeth's hand, she realized with sickening clarity, the hand that clutched stones as she walked into the lake. I don't want this. The words came out broken, jagged. I didn't ask for this. I just want to be myself again, just Sarah, just me. I understand. Dr. Morrison leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. But here's what you need to understand. You've always been a conduit. This ability didn't suddenly manifest 6 months ago. It's been part of you since birth, dormant, waiting for the right trigger to activate it. Sarah's mind raced backward, searching for clues she'd missed. The imaginary friends she'd had as a child that her mother dismissed as normal childhood behavior. The nightmares that plagued her teenage years, always featuring people and places she didn't recognize. The strange sense of déjà vu that followed her through college, making her feel like she'd lived certain moments before. What triggered it? Her throat felt tight, constricted. What changed 6 months ago? Dr. Morrison's expression shifted, became more guarded. That's what we need to figure out. Typically, a traumatic event or significant emotional stress can open the floodgates. Did anything happen around that time? An accident, a loss, a major life change? 6 months ago. Sarah's memory felt like Swiss cheese, full of holes she couldn't quite account for. Work had been normal, her marriage was solid, she'd been happy, or at least content. Nothing stood out as particularly traumatic or... The thought hit her like a physical blow. The accident, she whispered. I was in a car accident 6 months ago. Dr. Morrison straightened, attention sharpening. Tell me about it. It was minor. A fender bender on the highway during rush hour. Someone rear-ended me at a stoplight. I wasn't hurt, just shaken. The insurance covered everything. I didn't even think. Her breath caught. I blacked out, just for a few seconds after the impact. The EMTs said it was probably the adrenaline, nothing to worry about. But when I came to, I felt different, wrong. Like I'd left something important behind in those missing seconds. Or like something found its way in. Dr. Morrison finished quietly. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, but the cold came from inside, radiating outward from her bones. In the window's reflection, the 5 women pressed closer, their translucent forms gaining solidity, becoming more defined. The moment you lost consciousness, your defenses dropped. Dr. Morrison spoke slowly, carefully, like explaining algebra to a child. For those few seconds, you were a completely open door, and these 5 women, they'd been searching, Sarah. Searching for years, decades, for someone who could hear them, someone who could help them. Help them do what? But Sarah already knew the answer. It crystallized in her mind with terrible clarity, fragments of dreams and visions suddenly making horrific sense. Get justice, find peace, finish what was left undone when they died. Dr. Morrison's voice carried weight, the gravity of years spent navigating this impossible territory. Elizabeth needs someone to know her death wasn't weakness, but escape from unbearable cruelty. Hannah needs the truth about the fire revealed. It wasn't an accident, Sarah. Someone set it deliberately. Maria needs her daughter to know she fought to survive, that she didn't want to leave her, and the others. The strangled woman needs her killer found. Sarah's voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. And the car accident victim needs, I don't know yet. She shows me the crash over and over, but I can't understand what she's trying to tell me. Dr. Morrison nodded slowly. The communication isn't always clear at first. They're operating on instinct and emotion, not logic. But as you learn to work with them instead of fighting against them, the messages will become clearer. Work with them. Sarah's laugh was sharp, bitter. You're asking me to cooperate with the ghosts colonizing my brain. I'm asking you to acknowledge that fighting is what's tearing you apart. Dr. Morrison's tone shifted, became more intense. Right now, you're trying to maintain your sense of self while simultaneously pushing them away. It's like trying to hold a door shut while 5 people pound on the other side. Eventually, you'll exhaust yourself and the door will break. But if you open it willingly, on your terms, you can control the flow. Sarah's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, knuckles white. And what happens to Sarah Mitchell when I open that door? Where do I go when 5 dead women walk in? You don't go anywhere, you expand. Dr. Morrison leaned forward, his expression earnest. Think of it like this. Right now, you're a house with 5 squatters fighting for space. Instead, you need to become an apartment building where everyone has their own room, but you're still the landlord. You're still in control. You're still you. But you've made space for them too. The metaphor should have been comforting. Instead, it made Sarah want to scream. She thought of Marcus, of the life they'd built together, of the future they'd planned. How could she explain to him that she'd decided to become a boarding house for dead women? How could she maintain any semblance of normalcy when her consciousness was divided 5 ways? What if I say no? Her voice was barely audible. What if I refuse to help them? Dr. Morrison's expression turned grave. Then they'll keep pushing harder, becoming more aggressive in their attempts to be heard. The blackouts will increase. The boundary between you and them will deteriorate further. Eventually, he paused, seeming to weigh his words. Eventually, you'll fragment completely. You'll become 5 separate personalities, none of them fully you, none of them fully them. A permanent dissociative state that no medication or therapy can fix. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough over the past 6 months, sobbed into her pillow while Marcus slept, wept in her car during lunch breaks, let silent tears fall in the shower where no one could witness her breaking. So I don't actually have a choice. You have the most important choice of all. Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle now, almost kind. You can choose to do this with guidance and support, learning to navigate this ability safely. Or you can continue stumbling in the dark until you lose yourself completely. I've seen both outcomes, Sarah. Trust me when I say you want the first one. In the window's reflection, Elizabeth reached out a translucent hand, almost touching Sarah's shoulder. The gesture was gentle, pleading. Sarah could feel the weight of her sorrow, her desperation to be heard, to matter, to have her story known. How do we start? The question felt like surrender and salvation simultaneously. Dr. Morrison smiled, sad and knowing. We start with the truth, all of it, every vision, every blackout, every moment you felt them pushing through. And then we figure out what they need and how to give it to them without losing yourself in the process. Sarah nodded slowly, accepting the impossible. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and bruise. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was probably leaving work, heading home to a wife who was no longer just one person. The dead had chosen her. Now she had to figure out how to live with them. Marcus was asleep when Sarah finally made it home, his breathing steady and deep, one arm flung across her side of the bed in unconscious invitation. The clock on the nightstand glowed 11:47 p.m. She'd been gone for nearly 12 hours. Her phone showed 23 missed calls, 14 text messages and 3 voicemails, each one progressively more frantic. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching her husband sleep, and felt something crack inside her chest. He looked peaceful, vulnerable, completely unaware that the woman he married was becoming a stranger. She wanted to climb into bed beside him, curl into his warmth, pretend that everything was normal. But Dr. Morrison's homework assignment echoed in her mind, impossible to ignore. Tonight before you sleep, open yourself to them. Stop fighting. Let one of them speak through you, fully and completely. You need to understand what surrender feels like before you can learn control. The thought made her skin crawl, but she'd agreed. Signed the consent forms, listened to the safety protocols, accepted the emergency contact number she was supposed to call if things went wrong. Dr. Morrison had been clear. This was dangerous. Opening the door without proper training was like performing surgery on yourself with a butter knife. But it was also necessary, the foundation before the house could be built. Sarah backed out of the bedroom, pulling the door closed with trembling hands. Marcus stirred but didn't wake. Better that way. Better that he didn't witness what she was about to do. The bathroom mirror waited like an accusation. Sarah stood before it, hands gripping the sink's edge so hard that porcelain bit into her palms. Her reflection stared back. Pale skin, dark circles under green eyes that looked too wide, too frightened. This was still her face. Still Sarah Mitchell, 29 years old, marketing manager, wife, daughter, friend, all the labels that defined her. But labels were just words, and words could be rewritten. "Okay," she whispered to her reflection, to the women she knew were there even though she couldn't see them yet. "I'm ready. I'm listening." Nothing happened. The bathroom remained stubbornly normal. White tiles, blue towels, the faint drip of the faucet that Marcus kept meaning to fix. Sarah felt foolish, standing in her bathroom at midnight, talking to ghosts that might not even exist. Maybe Dr. Morrison was wrong. Maybe this was all just elaborate delusion, and she really was crazy after all. Then the cold hit. It started in her fingertips, spreading up her arms like frost crystallizing on glass. Sarah gasped, watching her breath mist in air that had been warm seconds before. The bathroom lights flickered once, twice, then steadied into a dimmer glow that made shadows pool in corners like spilled ink. In the mirror, her reflection began to change. It happened slowly at first. Subtle shifts in expression, a tilt of the head she hadn't made, eyes that looked sadder, older, more haunted. Then faster, the changes coming in waves. Sarah felt herself being pushed back, not violently but firmly, like someone moving past her in a crowded hallway. Her own consciousness retreated, becoming a passenger in her own body. Elizabeth emerged first. Sarah felt the weight of her immediately. Centuries of sorrow compressed into dense emotional gravity that threatened to collapse Sarah's chest inward. Her posture changed, shoulders curving forward in habitual defense, head bowing in practiced submission. When she looked up at the mirror again, Elizabeth stared back through Sarah's eyes. "Finally." The word came from Sarah's mouth, but in a voice slightly different, softer, more refined, with an accent that belonged to a different era. "You've been so loud inside, child. All that fighting, all that fear. You've made it terribly difficult to be heard." Sarah existed somewhere behind her own eyes, watching her body move without her permission. Her hand, Elizabeth's hand, reached up to touch the mirror's surface, fingers splaying against cold glass. "Do you know what it's like?" Elizabeth's voice cracked with emotion. "To be dead, but not gone. To exist in the space between what was and what never will be. I've been screaming for 179 years, and no one heard me until you. Until that moment when your consciousness flickered and I could finally reach through. Sarah wanted to respond, wanted to reclaim her body, but she was frozen, locked behind invisible bars in her own mind. Terror surged through her. This was what Dr. Morrison had warned about. The complete surrender, the vulnerability of letting another consciousness take the wheel. Don't be afraid. Elizabeth's expression in the mirror softened. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because you're the first person in nearly 2 centuries who can do what I couldn't, tell the truth. My husband, Thomas Hartwell, he wasn't just cruel when he drank. He was a monster. He beat me, burned me with cigar ends, broke my ribs so many times I stopped counting, and everyone knew, the whole town knew. But no one helped because I was his property, his wife, his to do with as he pleased. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, Elizabeth's tears, carrying grief so ancient it felt fossilized. When I walked into that lake, people called it madness, weakness, sin. My own family wouldn't speak my name after. I was buried in unconsecrated ground because suicide was unforgivable. But I wasn't weak, Sarah. I was trapped, and drowning was the only door left open to me. The bathroom walls seemed to pulse, breathing in rhythm with Sarah's, Elizabeth's labored breaths. In the mirror's reflection, the water appeared rising from the floor, climbing the walls, filling the space with that same dark lake that had claimed Elizabeth's life. Sarah felt the phantom weight of stones in pockets that didn't exist, the shocking cold of water closing over her head, the terrible piece of letting go. I need people to know. Elizabeth's voice broke completely. I need the record corrected. Thomas Hartwell was a murderer. He murdered my spirit long before I drowned my body. And he went on to marry twice more after me, both wives dead within 5 years, both deaths ruled accidents or natural causes, 3 women erased because no one would hold him accountable. The water in the reflection reached the ceiling, and Sarah felt herself drowning, lungs burning for air that wouldn't come. Just when she thought she couldn't endure another second, Elizabeth pulled back. The water vanished. Sarah gasped, stumbling backward against the bathroom wall, fully herself again, her consciousness snapping back into control like a rubber band released. She slid down the wall, landing hard on cold tile, trembling so violently her teeth chattered. The bathroom was normal again. No water, no frost, no flickering lights. Just Sarah alone, with the ghost of Elizabeth's grief still wrapped around her like a shroud. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Morrison. How did it go? Sarah's hands shook as she typed. She spoke through me. I felt everything. Her death, her pain, everything. The response came immediately. Good. That's the first step. Now you know what they need. The question is, are you strong enough to give it to them? Sarah looked at her reflection in the mirror. She looked the same as before. Same face, same body, same Sarah. But something fundamental had shifted. She'd felt another person's death, carried another person's truth, become a vessel for a voice that had been silenced for nearly 2 centuries. Elizabeth wasn't asking for revenge. She was asking for something far more profound, for her story to be told, for the truth to be known, for her life and death to matter. Sarah thought about Thomas Hartwell, about the 2 other women he'd married and killed, about all the violence that had been excused and forgotten because it was easier than acknowledging the truth. She thought about Hannah burning, Maria bleeding, the strangled woman clawing at her throat, the car accident victim trying desperately to communicate something important. 5 women, 5 tragedies, 5 stories that deserved to be heard. Sarah pulled herself up, legs unsteady, and looked at her reflection with new determination. I'll help you, she whispered. All of you. I'll make sure you're heard. In the mirror, for just a moment, she saw them all standing behind her. Elizabeth, Hannah, Maria, and the 2 whose names she didn't yet know. They weren't smiling, but something in their translucent faces softened. Hope, maybe, or something close to it. Sarah turned away from the mirror and headed for the bedroom. Marcus still slept peacefully, unaware that his wife had just become a bridge between the living and the dead. She climbed into bed beside him, careful not to wake him, and lay staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, she would start excavating buried truths and demanding justice for the voiceless. Tonight, she would try to remember how to be just Sarah for a few more hours. But even as sleep finally claimed her, she knew the truth. Sarah Mitchell, as she'd been, was gone. In her place stood something new, something necessary, something terrifying and powerful. A woman who carried the dead and refused to let them be forgotten. The historical society smelled like old paper and broken promises. Sarah stood in the doorway of the cramped office, breathing in dust particles that danced in shafts of weak morning sunlight. Behind a desk buried under manila folders and leather-bound ledgers sat a woman who looked ancient enough to have witnessed history firsthand. Wire-rimmed glasses perched on a sharp nose, white hair pulled into a severe bun, fingers gnarled with arthritis as they traced columns in a ledger from the 1800s. "Can I help you?" The woman's voice was surprisingly strong, cutting through the musty silence like a blade. "I'm looking for information about a death that occurred in 1847. Sarah's own voice sounded strange to her ears, steadier than she felt. "A woman named Elizabeth Hartwell. She drowned in a lake near here." The woman, Mrs. Pritchard, according to the nameplate on her desk, looked up sharply, eyes suddenly focused and intense behind those thick lenses. "That's a name I haven't heard in years. What's your interest in Elizabeth Hartwell?" Sarah had rehearsed this moment with Dr. Morrison yesterday, practiced the lie until it felt smooth. "I'm researching women's history in the area for a project. Elizabeth's death was ruled a suicide, but I'm interested in the circumstances that led to it." Mrs. Pritchard studied her for a long moment, and Sarah felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing, pressing against her chest, searching for deception. Then the old woman nodded slowly and gestured to a chair piled with books. "Clear that off and sit. This isn't a story for standing." Sarah moved the books carefully, their spines cracking with age, and sat. The chair groaned beneath her weight. Mrs. Pritchard closed the ledger she'd been reading and folded her hands atop it, arthritic knuckles white against spotted skin. "Elizabeth Hartwell was my great-great-grandmother's sister," she said quietly. "The family doesn't talk about her. Suicide was shameful back then, unforgivable. But my grandmother, she was just a child when it happened. She told me the truth before she died. Said it was important that someone remember." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Elizabeth stirred inside her consciousness, pressing forward, desperate to hear. Sarah pushed back gently, maintaining control like Dr. Morrison had taught her. "Not yet. Let the story unfold naturally." What was the truth? Sarah leaned forward, hands clasped in her lap to hide their trembling. Mrs. Pritchard's expression hardened, decades of suppressed anger surfacing in the lines around her mouth. "Thomas Hartwell was a monster disguised as a gentleman. Wealthy, respected, well-connected. He married Elizabeth when she was 17. He was 35. Within a year, the bruises started appearing. Black eyes blamed on clumsiness. Broken bones attributed to falls. Elizabeth wore long sleeves in summer and high collars in winter, hiding what everyone already knew but refused to acknowledge. The words landed like stones in Sarah's stomach. She'd felt Elizabeth's memories, experienced fragments of her life, but hearing it confirmed by a living witness made it devastatingly real. "People knew?" Sarah's voice came out hoarse. "Everyone knew." Mrs. Pritchard's hands tightened on the ledger. "But Thomas Hartwell owned half the town. The mayor, the sheriff, even the pastor, they all owed him money or favors or both. Elizabeth tried to leave once, went to her parents. They brought her back to Thomas within hours. Told her marriage was sacred, that her duty was to submit and pray for his soul." The old woman's voice dripped with bitter contempt. "She was 23 when she walked into Lake Meridian with stones in her pockets. They found her 3 days later." Sarah felt Elizabeth's presence surge, emotion crashing through her defenses like a tidal wave. Vindication mixed with rage, grief twisted with relief at finally being heard. Sarah gripped the chair's armrests, anchoring herself to the physical world, refusing to let Elizabeth take over. What happened to Thomas after? She managed to keep her voice level despite the chaos inside her mind. Mrs. Pritchard's smile was cold, cruel. He married again within 8 months, a girl named Catherine, only 19. She died 2 years later, officially from pneumonia. But my grandmother said she'd seen Catherine with a broken arm, cracked ribs, cuts that couldn't be explained away. Thomas married a 3rd time after that, Anna. She lasted 4 years before she fell down the stairs and broke her neck. 3 women, 3 murders disguised as accidents or illness or suicide. Sarah's hands were shaking visibly now, anger burning through her veins like acid. Elizabeth wasn't just one victim. She was the first in a pattern that no one stopped, no one questioned, because Thomas Hartwell had money and power and the complicity of an entire town. Why didn't anyone do something? The question burst out before Sarah could stop it. After the 2nd wife, the 3rd, why didn't anyone see the pattern? Because men like Thomas Hartwell were untouchable. Mrs. Pritchard's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, resigned. And women like Elizabeth and Catherine and Anna were expendable. That was the world back then. Hell. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. That's still the world now, just with better window dressing. Sarah thought about the news stories she'd seen. The statistics about domestic violence, the women who died every day at the hands of partners who were supposed to love them. Elizabeth had died 179 years ago, but her story was being repeated constantly, endlessly, because nothing fundamental had changed. I need to document this. Sarah's determination crystallized into something sharp, focused. Thomas Hartwell's crimes need to be on the record, officially. Is there anything here, letters, journals, court documents, that proves what he did? Mrs. Pritchard stood slowly, joints creaking, and moved to a filing cabinet in the corner. She pulled out a thick folder, yellowed and fragile, and set it on the desk with reverence. This is everything I've collected over the years. Elizabeth's death certificate, medical records from when Catherine was treated for her accidents, newspaper clippings about Anna's death, letters from people who witnessed Thomas's violence but were too afraid to speak publicly. Sarah reached for the folder with trembling hands. Inside were pieces of history that had been deliberately buried, evidence of crimes that powerful people wanted forgotten. She opened it carefully, and a loose page fell out. A letter written in faded ink, the handwriting shaky but readable. My name is Elizabeth Hartwell. If you are reading this, I am dead. My husband Thomas will claim I was mad, weak, melancholic. He will say I brought shame to his name. But I want someone to know the truth. I am not mad. I am trapped. And if I die, it is because he has killed every part of me that wanted to live. Please, whoever finds this, remember that I tried. I tried so hard to survive him. The letter was dated 3 days before Elizabeth drowned. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes, blurring the words. Elizabeth had known she was going to die. She'd left a suicide note that was actually a murder confession, one final desperate attempt to be heard. I never knew this existed. Sarah's voice broke. My grandmother hid it for decades, afraid of what Thomas's family might do if they found out. She gave it to me on her deathbed, made me promise to keep it safe until someone came looking. Mrs. Pritchard's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I've been waiting 60 years for someone to care enough about Elizabeth to ask questions. You're the first. Sarah looked down at the letter, at Elizabeth's handwriting, at the physical proof that she had existed, had suffered, had been real. Inside her mind, Elizabeth's presence was a mixture of gratitude and grief so intense it threatened to split Sarah open. Can I make copies of all this? Sarah asked. I want to write about it. Make sure Elizabeth's story gets told properly, and Catherine's and Anna's. All of them deserve to be remembered. Mrs. Pritchard nodded. Take the whole folder. I've kept it safe long enough. Time for the truth to see daylight. She paused, studying Sarah with those sharp eyes. You feel connected to this somehow, don't you? It's not just academic interest. Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, then decided truth deserved truth. I feel like Elizabeth's been trying to tell me her story, like she's been waiting all this time for someone to listen. The old woman's expression softened. My grandmother used to say the dead don't rest until justice is served, or their stories are told. Maybe Elizabeth found herself a storyteller. She reached across the desk, placed one gnarled hand over Sarah's. Do right by her. Give her the voice she never had in life. Sarah gripped the folder tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. This was why Elizabeth had found her, why she'd pushed through during those seconds of unconsciousness after the accident. Not for revenge, not for supernatural dramatics, but for this, for truth, for witness, for the simple acknowledgement that her life and death mattered. I will, Sarah promised. I'll make sure everyone knows what Thomas Hartwell really was and what happened to the women he destroyed. Outside, the morning had grown brighter, sun breaking through clouds that had threatened rain. Sarah walked to her car, clutching the folder like a sacred text, feeling Elizabeth's presence inside her consciousness, not pushing, not demanding, but simply present, peaceful, for the first time since they'd merged. One down. 4 more to go. Sarah started the engine and headed back toward Dr. Morrison's office. She had work to do. Marcus was waiting in the kitchen when Sarah got home, arms crossed, jaw tight, the posture of a man who'd reached the end of his patience. The folder from the Historical Society felt suddenly heavy in Sarah's hands, evidence of one truth while she'd been hiding another. Where were you? His voice was controlled. Too controlled, the kind of calm that preceded storms. You left before I woke up. No note, no text, phone going straight to voicemail. I've been calling for hours, Sarah, hours. Guilt crashed through her, sharp and acidic. She'd been so consumed with Elizabeth's story, with the rush of finally having proof, that she'd completely forgotten to check in with her husband. Her phone had died sometime after leaving the Historical Society, and she'd been too focused on getting to Dr. Morrison to notice. I'm sorry. I should have. She stopped, suddenly exhausted by the lies, by the constant performance of normalcy. Marcus, we need to talk, really talk, about everything. His expression shifted from anger to concern so quickly it made her chest ache. He uncrossed his arms, took a step toward her. What's going on? And don't say you're fine, because you're not. You haven't been fine for months, and I've been trying to be patient, trying to give you space. But Sarah, his voice cracked, I'm losing you. I can feel it. You're slipping away, and I don't know how to hold on. The raw vulnerability in his words nearly broke her. Sarah set the folder on the kitchen counter with trembling hands and forced herself to meet his eyes. What if I told you something impossible, something that sounds completely insane but is absolutely true? Marcus moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the familiar scent that usually made her feel safe. Try me. Sarah took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. I see dead people, I hear them, I feel them, and they're inside me, Marcus. 5 women who died violently, who have unfinished business, and they've been using me to try to complete it. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stared at her, expressions cycling through confusion, disbelief, concern, fear. She watched him process, watched him trying to reconcile the woman he married with the stranger standing in their kitchen, claiming to be haunted. Sarah, he stopped, started again. Is this some kind of breakdown? Because if you need help, we can get you help. There's no shame in I'm not having a breakdown. Sarah's voice was steady despite the chaos inside her. I'm seeing a specialist, Dr. Morrison. He's been helping me understand what's happening. It started 6 months ago after the car accident. Something opened inside me, and these women, they found their way in. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, the gesture he made when stressed or overwhelmed. You're serious. You actually believe you're, what? Possessed? Not possessed. I'm a conduit. It's different. They're not trying to hurt me, Marcus. They're trying to get justice, to have their stories heard. Like Elizabeth. She gestured to the folder. Elizabeth Hartwell. She drowned herself in 1847 to escape an abusive husband who went on to murder 2 more women, and no one knew because he was rich and powerful and no one questioned him. But Elizabeth, she's been waiting 179 years for someone to tell the truth about what happened to her. She was talking too fast now, words tumbling out like water breaking through a dam. Marcus listened, his face growing paler with each sentence, and Sarah could see him struggling between wanting to believe her and thinking she'd lost her mind completely. "Show me," he said finally. "If this is real, show me." Sarah's heart stuttered. "What?" "Let one of them talk to me. If they're really there, if this isn't just—" He gestured helplessly. "Just some kind of elaborate delusion, then prove it. Let me talk to Elizabeth or Hannah or whoever. Because right now, Sarah, I'm terrified that my wife is having a psychotic break and I don't know how to help her." The request hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Sarah thought about last night, about surrendering control to Elizabeth, about the terrifying sensation of being pushed aside in her own body. Dr. Morrison had warned her to be careful, to only allow it under controlled circumstances with proper support and safety measures in place. But Marcus was her husband, the man she'd vowed to spend her life with, and he deserved to know the truth, even if it destroyed everything between them. "Okay," she whispered. "But Marcus, it's going to be scary. You're going to see me, but it won't be me. Not completely. And you have to promise not to freak out, not to call 911 or try to restrain me or anything. Just let it happen and trust that I'm still in here, still safe." Marcus nodded, but she could see fear flickering in his eyes. He sat down at the kitchen table, gripping its edge like it was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. "I'm ready." Sarah closed her eyes, reaching inward to where Elizabeth waited. She felt the woman's presence immediately, stronger now after the visit to the Historical Society, more solid, more real. "He needs to understand," Sarah thought. "Show him. Make him believe." Elizabeth surged forward, and Sarah felt herself being pushed back, becoming the passenger again. Her posture changed immediately, shoulders curving forward, head tilting in that submissive way Elizabeth had learned to survive. When her eyes opened, they carried centuries of sorrow. "Marcus." Elizabeth's voice came from Sarah's mouth, softer, more refined, with that subtle accent from another era. "Your wife is telling you the truth. I am Elizabeth Hartwell, and I have been dead for 179 years. Marcus's face went chalk white. He gripped the table harder, knuckles turning bloodless. "Jesus Christ!" "He didn't help me either." Elizabeth's smile was sad, bitter. "I prayed every night while my husband beat me. God either wasn't listening or didn't care. Sarah is the first person who's heard me in nearly 2 centuries, Marcus. She's the first person willing to tell my story, to expose the monster who killed me and the 2 women who came after me." "This isn't—" Marcus shook his head violently. "This can't be real. Sarah, stop this. Stop it right now. She can't hear you. She's here, but I'm in control at the moment." Elizabeth leaned forward, and Marcus flinched. "I know this frightens you. I know you want your wife back exactly as she was, but she's changed, Marcus. She's become something more, a bridge between the living and the dead, a voice for those who were silenced. And if you truly love her, you'll support her in this impossible task, instead of demanding she remain the woman who no longer exists." Tears streamed down Marcus's face. "I want to help her, I do. But I can't." He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking. "How do I compete with ghosts? How do I keep my wife when she's sharing space with 5 dead women?" Elizabeth's expression softened. "You don't compete. You coexist. Sarah loves you, Marcus. That hasn't changed. But she's also committed to helping us, and that commitment is just as real, just as powerful. You can either accept both parts of her, the wife you married and the conduit she's become, or you can walk away. But don't ask her to choose between you and us, because that choice will destroy her more completely than anything we ever could." Sarah felt Elizabeth pulling back, relinquishing control. The transition was smoother this time, less jarring. Sarah blinked, fully herself again, and saw Marcus staring at her with red-rimmed eyes and an expression of complete devastation. "Was that—" His voice broke. "Was that really—" That was Elizabeth. Sarah's own voice felt rough, unfamiliar after Elizabeth's refined tones. "That's what's been happening to me, Marcus. That's why I've been distant, distracted, different. I'm not just Sarah anymore. I'm Sarah plus 5 other consciousnesses that need help, need justice, need to be heard." Marcus stood abruptly, chair scraping against tile. He paced to the window, stood with his back to her, shoulders tense. The silence stretched, became unbearable. Sarah waited, heart hammering, knowing that whatever he said next would determine the future of their marriage. Finally, he turned around. His face was streaked with tears, but his expression had shifted from horror to something that might have been reluctant acceptance. "I don't understand this. I don't know how to process it." "But Sarah," he crossed the kitchen, took her hands in his. "I married you for better or worse. I didn't know worse would involve sharing you with dead women, but—" A broken laugh escaped him. "I'm not walking away. I love you, all of you, even the parts I can't comprehend." Relief flooded through Sarah so intensely she nearly collapsed. She threw her arms around Marcus, burying her face in his chest, and felt him hold her tightly, desperately, like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. "I'm scared," she whispered against his shirt. "I'm so scared I'm going to lose myself completely. That one day I'll wake up and Sarah Mitchell will be gone, replaced by 5 dead women wearing her skin. Then I'll be here to remind you who you are." Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. "Every single day, I'll remind you. You're Sarah Mitchell. You're my wife. You make terrible coffee and laugh at stupid jokes and cry during dog food commercials. And yes, you're also somehow a bridge to the dead, but that doesn't erase who you've always been." Sarah pulled back, looked up at him through tears. "I love you. I love you too." He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. "Now show me what's in that folder. If we're doing this, if we're going to help these women, then we're doing it together." 3 weeks later, Sarah stood before a crowd of 200 people in the university's lecture hall, her hands trembling as she gripped the podium. The overhead lights were too bright, hot against her skin, making sweat bead at her temples, despite the room's aggressive air conditioning. Behind her, a projection screen displayed Elizabeth Hartwell's letter, that final desperate plea for someone to remember the truth. Marcus sat in the front row, his presence a lifeline in the sea of unfamiliar faces. Dr. Morrison occupied the seat beside him, nodding encouragement. And inside Sarah's consciousness, all 5 women waited, pressing forward, desperate for their moment. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she began, voice wavering before steadying, "and I'm here to tell you about 5 women who should never have been forgotten." "Who do?" The presentation had taken weeks to compile. Elizabeth's story backed by historical documents, Hannah's fire investigated through old newspaper archives and fire department records, Maria's death confirmed through hospital records that revealed complications her doctor had ignored, the strangled woman, whose name Sarah had finally learned was Rebecca Walsh, murdered in 1989 by a boyfriend the police had questioned but never charged, and the car accident victim, Jennifer Price, whose 2019 crash had been ruled driver error despite mechanical issues that were never properly investigated. 5 women, 5 injustices, 5 stories that Sarah had excavated from deliberate obscurity. Elizabeth Hartwell walked into Lake Meridian on October 14, 1847, with stones in her pockets. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she spoke, channeling not just her own conviction, but Elizabeth's need to be heard. History recorded it as suicide born of melancholy, but the truth, she gestured to the screen behind her, The truth is that Elizabeth was murdered by her husband Thomas Hartwell through years of systematic abuse. She left a letter hidden by her family for nearly 2 centuries that explicitly names him as her killer. The audience was silent, rapt. Sarah felt their attention like a physical weight, felt the magnitude of finally speaking these truths in public. Inside her mind, Elizabeth's presence swelled with something that might have been joy or vindication, or both. Thomas Hartwell went on to marry 2 more times. Catherine Hartwell died in 1849 from pneumonia, though medical records show repeated treatment for broken bones and internal injuries consistent with abuse. Anna Hartwell died in 1853 from a fall down the stairs that broke her neck. 3 dead wives. 3 women erased from history because Thomas Hartwell had money and power and the complicity of everyone around him. Sarah clicked to the next slide. Hannah Prescott's photograph, young and vibrant, taken weeks before the fire. Hannah Prescott was 16 when she died in a tenement fire in 1952. The fire was ruled accidental, blamed on faulty wiring. But investigation of the original fire marshal's report, she clicked again, revealing the document, shows evidence of accelerant use that was never followed up on. Hannah died because the landlord, Samuel Prescott, her uncle, had been sexually abusing her for 2 years. When she threatened to tell, he burned the building down with her inside, collecting insurance money and silencing his victim in one act. Gasps rippled through the audience. Sarah pushed forward, adrenaline and righteous anger propelling her through the fear. Marcus was leaning forward, tears visible on his face even from the podium. Dr. Morrison looked proud, satisfied, like watching a student finally master a difficult lesson. Maria Torres died during childbirth in 1973. She was 22 years old. Maria's photograph appeared. Dark eyes, bright smile, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. Hospital records show she suffered a placental abruption, a serious but treatable complication. She begged for help, told nurses something was wrong, described symptoms that should have triggered immediate intervention. But her doctor, Dr. Richard Holloway, was attending a golf tournament that afternoon. He told nurses to wait, that Maria was being dramatic, that first-time mothers always panicked. By the time he arrived 3 hours later, Maria had bled out. Her daughter survived. Maria didn't. Dr. Holloway faced no consequences, continued practicing for another 20 years. The anger in the room was palpable now, a collective fury building with each story. Sarah felt it feeding the women inside her, giving them strength, validation, the acknowledgement they'd been denied in life. Rebecca Walsh was strangled to death in 1989 by her boyfriend, David Chen. Rebecca's smiling face appeared on screen, followed by police photographs Sarah had obtained through Freedom of Information requests. Grainy images showing bruises on Rebecca's neck, the ransacked apartment, evidence of struggle. Police questioned David. He claimed Rebecca attacked him first, that he defended himself. Despite witness testimony about previous abuse, despite Rebecca's diary detailing his violence, despite physical evidence inconsistent with his story, prosecutors declined to press charges. David Chen is alive today, married with children, while Rebecca has been dead for 36 years. Sarah's voice broke on the last sentence. Inside her mind, Rebecca's rage was a living thing, hot and furious and demanding acknowledgement. Sarah took a shaky breath, clicked to the final slide. Jennifer Price died in a car accident in 2019. She was 27, an environmental engineer, beloved daughter and sister. Jennifer's face appeared, laughing, alive, completely unaware of the death waiting for her. The accident was ruled driver error, but Jennifer's family hired an independent investigator who found evidence of brake line tampering. Jennifer had recently testified against her employer, a chemical company dumping toxic waste illegally. The day before her testimony was scheduled, her brakes failed on the highway. Her car crashed into a barrier at 70 miles per hour. No one was ever charged. The case was closed within weeks. Sarah gripped the podium, legs suddenly unsteady. The weight of 5 deaths, 5 injustices, 5 stories finally being told in public. It was overwhelming, crushing, more than one person should have to carry. But she wasn't one person anymore, was she? She was 6. Sarah plus 5 women who refused to be erased. These women died because the systems meant to protect them failed, because powerful people valued their own comfort over justice, because society has always been more interested in maintaining order than acknowledging uncomfortable truths. Sarah's voice gained strength, became something fierce and uncompromising. But I'm done being silent. We're done being silent. Their stories deserve to be heard, and the people who harmed them deserve to be named and held accountable, even if that accountability comes posthumously. She clicked to the final slide, all 5 women's photographs together, a gallery of faces that should still be alive, should still be laughing and working and loving and existing. I'm calling on the district attorney to reopen Rebecca Walsh's case. I'm calling on the State Medical Board to posthumously review Dr. Holloway's conduct in Maria Torres's death. I'm calling on the Fire Marshal's office to reinvestigate Hannah Prescott's death. I'm calling on the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to re-examine Jennifer Price's accident. And I'm calling on historians to correct the record about Elizabeth Hartwell and acknowledge Thomas Hartwell for what he was, a serial killer who murdered 3 women and escaped justice because of his wealth and status. The audience erupted into applause, but Sarah barely heard it. Inside her consciousness, she felt the 5 women beginning to recede, their presence becoming lighter, less desperate. They'd been heard. Their stories had been told in public, witnessed by hundreds of people who now carried their truths forward. The need that had kept them tethered to Sarah was loosening, threads of connection beginning to fray. "Wait," Sarah whispered, though no one else could hear. "Are you leaving?" Elizabeth's voice came through clear and strong, no longer filtered through desperation. "Our stories have been told. Justice may not come in our lifetimes, but the truth is known now. That's what we needed, Sarah. Thank you." One by one, Sarah felt them pulling away. Elizabeth first, then Maria, Hannah, Rebecca, and finally Jennifer. Not disappearing completely, but stepping back, releasing their grip on Sarah's consciousness. The space they left behind felt simultaneously empty and free, like waking from a years-long dream to find herself alone in her own mind again. Sarah stumbled, caught herself on the podium. Marcus was on his feet immediately, moving toward the stage. The applause continued, questions being shouted, cameras flashing, but Sarah could barely process any of it. She was just Sarah again, just herself, singular, alone, complete. "Doctor." Morrison appeared beside Marcus, both men supporting her as she stepped down from the stage. "You did it," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "You gave them exactly what they needed." Sarah looked back at the projection screen where 5 faces smiled, frozen in moments before tragedy claimed them. They weren't completely gone. She could still feel faint echoes of their presence, like fingerprints on glass. But they were no longer demanding, no longer consuming her from the inside out. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus squeezed her hand. "Now we go home, and tomorrow we figure out how Sarah Mitchell moves forward as just Sarah Mitchell again." But even as they left the lecture hall, Sarah knew the truth. She would never be just Sarah Mitchell again. She'd been changed by carrying the dead, by being a voice for the voiceless. And maybe that was okay. Maybe that was who she was always meant to become. Someone who refused to let the forgotten stay forgotten. Someone who spoke truth, even when it was dangerous. Someone who carried the weight of other people's stories and didn't break beneath it. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. Sarah tilted her face toward the sky, feeling lighter than she had in months. The stars looked impossibly bright, and for the first time in half a year, Sarah felt like she could breathe. Sarah Mitchell's journey forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. How many voices have been silenced throughout history? How many Elizabeth Hartwells walked into lakes carrying stones and shame instead of justice? How many stories were buried because it was easier than holding powerful people accountable? Sarah chose to carry that weight, to become a vessel for the voiceless, to sacrifice her own peace so that others could finally find theirs. But here's the question that should haunt us all. Would you have made the same choice? If 5 dead women knocked on the door of your consciousness, desperate and demanding, would you open it? Would you risk your sanity, your marriage, your very identity to tell stories the world wanted forgotten? Or would you fight to stay just yourself, singular and safe, even knowing that silence is its own kind of violence? The most terrifying part of Sarah's story isn't the ghosts or the blackouts or the fractured identity. It's the realization that the systems that failed Elizabeth, Hannah, Maria, Rebecca, and Jennifer are still failing women today. Different decades, different names, same patterns of violence excused and truth suppressed. Sarah became a conduit not just for the dead, but for all of us who carry stories too painful to speak aloud. She proved that bearing witness matters, that speaking truth has power, and that sometimes losing yourself is the only way to find what truly matters. The dead may have chosen Sarah, but she chose courage, and that choice changed everything. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the voices we silence and the truths we avoid, follow the channel, leave a like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's make sure no more stories get buried in unmarked graves.